Hey guys, I am very excited to film this video for the one reason is that this is my very first book review, and this first book review is on the book Heaven is for Real by Todd Brupo and Lynn Vincent. I can honestly say that this book is my favorite book of 2014. I know this book was not published in 2014, but I heard of it in the beginning of January when I went to go watch a movie with my family and I saw the preview for this movie. So I needed to buy the book. I didn't buy the book. This is a book that I borrowed from my cousin, and I began reading it and I finished it in one day. Technically, it wasn't a day because I started Wednesday. I started Wednesday at it was 1 and didn't finish till 2 and then fell asleep, and then when I woke up, I finished the last 20 pages in like 30 minutes. So I read most of the book in like an hour and a half. So I finished the book in about 2 hours, 3 hours. And the only reason why I stood up that late to read this book was because this book is amazing. So for those of you who have not heard of this book or of the movie that's coming out or that has come out already, depending on when this video is uploaded, Heaven is for Real is about a 3-year-old boy named Colton, and he goes through a near-death experience when he gets very sick. So after his near-death experience and after he gets very sick, Colton does end up getting better, and when he gets home, he starts telling his parents about how he had visited heaven. When I read that this book was a true story about a child who experienced a near-death experience and who went to heaven and back, I needed to read this book. So my cousin bought it at this bookstore the other day, and I was like, let me borrow it, dude. Like, I really need to read it. So I began reading it and I completely fell in love with it. So for those of you who have not read Heaven is for Real, I recommend you to exit this video, watch it after you read the book, and then we can talk about it and we can discuss, and you can comment your thoughts below, and we can let everything flow out magically. So I do recommend you to either exit the video, pause it, go buy the book, read it, then come back over here so we can read the story and talk about the story and enjoy the story. So now let's get back to the book. In the beginning of the book, we get a prologue to the story, and it starts off with the dad. He starts off in the prologue saying about how they were going to a trip and how I think it was 2003 was like the year when all this happened, and when like their whole life like just went into mess. By the way, the dad's a pastor, so he knows about God and he talks about God and all that. So in the prologue, it says they're passing through the hospital where the little boy was previous months ago or a couple of years ago. I don't know how long that the prologue was written before like the actual story, but when they pass the hospital, the dad asks Colton if he wants to go back to the hospital, and he's like, no, he doesn't want to go back. He wants his sister to go to the hospital. And I thought that was really funny, and his sister says, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. And then I think it's his mom that asks Colton if he remembers being in the hospital, and then he comes up with the answer saying, yes, mommy, I do remember. That's where the angels sang to me. That captivated me so easily, and I just kept reading it. I was like, I'm going to read the first 30 pages, and then I'm going to go to sleep, and then I'm going to read like the rest of the book tomorrow. That didn't happen. By the time I closed the book, I was literally in like the 100th page. Once we go to, he starts talking about how he was in Jesus's lap, and then the prologue finishes, and it skips to first chapter, which is where the family go to like this, I think it's a zoo, and they go to like this exhibit where there's spiders, and there's a spider that his sister held in her hand, and if you held the spider, they would give you a sticker, and Colton wanted a sticker, but he didn't want to hold the spider because he was scared. So at the end of the first chapter, he's like, no, I don't want to touch the spider because, he was afraid of it or whatever. Colton is one of those little boys, obviously like any other little boy, who he is in love with superheroes, and he has the superhero action figures, and he's always putting them in this imaginary battles with dragons and warriors, and they always end up winning and killing the bad guys, and just any typical 3-year-old's mind. Dad is in a trip, and the mom and the daughter and Colton are going to meet him up there. But he was being babysat by a family friend because the mom was at work. The mom was is a teacher, and the dad was in like a convention or something for the pastors. And the babysitter, which was like the close family friend, called the mom and said that Colton wasn't feeling very well, that Colton had a fever, and he had sweat droplets the size of like raindrops and on his forehead, and he just got very sick. And then the mom called the dad that the trip had to be delayed because of Colton's illness. And then all of a sudden, Colton just got back to normal. He was, his normal 3-year-old child self who ran around the house, played with his action figures, and did all sorts of things. After Colton gets better, the mom and their daughter and Colton go up to meet their dad at that place where he was. I don't remember the location. And they go to that exhibit, and after the exhibit, the kids wanted to go for a swim, so they went back to the hotel. And when they got back to the hotel, they went to dinner with another group of pastors and their wife. And then that's when Colton and Casey began feeling sick. And when they reached the hotel again, they both began throwing up. Casey had just thrown up like about three or four times, but Colton had spent the whole night. I'm sorry, the automatic light in my bar just like totally went out. So Colton keeps throwing up throughout the night, and the mom and the dad are very worried. The dad the next morning had to go to the church with the pastor that they met at dinner so he can get, different ideas of how to, do it at his church. He was the only one who fell asleep, and when he woke up, his wife was still awake with Colton awake, and Colton was feeling very sick. After that, they go to the hospital, and they tell him that there's nothing wrong with him, that it's just probably the stomach flu coming back. At first, when Colton was getting sick, they took him to the hospital, and they said that he had the flu. So then the flu went away, he got better, and then they went to the place where their dad was, and then he got sick again, and the doctor said that it was just a flu. So they're in the doctor for a couple of days, and Colton hasn't ate for a total of 5 days, and then he just keeps getting sick and worse, and he starts weighing 30 to 40 pounds, normally large knees and elbows. He's very skinny. The dad lifts him up from the bed, and he feels very light, and the parents are just losing complete faith. The dad is like praying to God and, being so mad at God because he's taking away his son after he had already taken away the other baby that they were expecting. The mom had a miscarriage before Colton. So he was yelling to God when he was in the hospital, and he was saying that he was a preacher and that's how he paid the people who worked for him. And he was just very, very mad at God. And he later regrets it, of course, but then at that moment he was really mad at him. Mom was in the hospital calling family members that Colton was very sick, and that, for them to pray for him and to keep him in their prayers. And then Colton didn't want to eat. He hadn't ate for a total of 10 days. He was going to go through the surgery that required him to drink this liquid that the dad explains it that the liquid, no human would drink it because it just looked so disgusting. So Colton didn't want to drink it. So at the end, the doctors decided that he wasn't going to drink it because he wasn't going to drink anyway. So they decided to just do the surgery like that to see if they could do anything. And they found out that he had a ruptured appendix. And after they found out he had a ruptured appendix, the parents lost complete faith, and they were just very mad. And eventually, I don't want to, spoil the whole book for you guys. Eventually he gets better, but when he gets home, that's when everything, like, all the supernatural things start happening. Nothing like vampires or anything, of course. That would just ruin the whole story. But the dad describes it as supernatural events that happened to Colton. I'm going to go back a little bit. Before they got out of the hospital, Colton, the doctors had lost complete faith, as well as the parents, and Colton was already very ill and very weak and everything. And then all of a sudden he just came back, and he was his normal 3-year-old self, playing with his action figures, running around the hospital room. And then nurses just came in and out of the room astonished at what they were seeing, because obviously they had lost complete faith. So a couple of months after they had gotten back from the hospital, Colton started talking to his parents about how he had gone to heaven, and how he had sat on Jesus' lap, and how he had met God, and how he had met so many other people that his parents never talked to him about, like his pop, his dad's grandfather, and how he loved him, and how Colton was very well accepted with him. Colton starts talking about all the people he starts meeting, and he tells his mom that why didn't he ever tell him that she had 2 sisters. And his mom's is like, no, baby, you have 1 sister and your cousin. And he's like, no, mommy, I have 2 sisters. One of them died in your belly. And then the mom's very surprised, because obviously, as I said before, she had a miscarriage, but she hadn't told Colton or basically anyone about it. But he knew, and he said that his sister kept giving him hugs and kisses, and he wasn't very happy with that because he does not like hugs. And then the mom goes to explaining how girls love hugs, and how because that was his sister, she wanted to give him hugs. The parents asked Colton to describe what the sister looked like, and he says that she had brown hair and she looked like his older sister, except, with brown hair and not colored eyes. And the mom was really happy because she always wanted one of her kids to look like her, and they all came out like the dad with blonde hair and blue eyes. So she was very happy about that. And then Colton starts talking about how everyone in heaven has wings and how everyone in heaven has lights in their heads, which I suppose they're halos. That's what the dad says. And then how he met Jesus and how Jesus had markers. He says markers, and I was very confused at first when he said that Jesus had markers. And then the dad goes to explaining that he started asking him questions about what the markers were, and he said that Colton said that he had a total of 4 markers, that they were located 2 in his hands and then 2 on top of his feet. And that's when, God was in the cross. And he said that God had a golden crown on his head and that he was larger than anyone. God was the only one who didn't have wings, and that he would go up and down like an elevator. That's how he, I guess, flew, and that Colton described it as being in an elevator. And he said that every person in heaven had wings, and that he was very sad because his wings were small compared to everyone else's wings. So when the dad shows him a picture of his grandfather, of Colton's dad's grandfather, when the grandfather is old, Colton says he doesn't know that person. He says that everyone in heaven is young, that there's no old people in heaven. And then the dad shows him a picture of his granddad when he was young, and Colton's like, yeah, that's Pop. That's the one that played with me, that talked to me, that loved me when I was in heaven. So Colton just goes, describing all these people he met, his sister, his granddad. The dad stopped talking to him about that for a while, and then the dad stated that when they would go to a grocery store, Colton would always run away from them after they left the store and run to the car. And then one day Colton saw a rabbit on the ground that was run over by a car, and then the dad said, you see that, baby, that will happen to you if you keep running away from us at the store. Someone is going to back up with their car and they're going to hit you. And he's like, well, that's good. He says that that's good, that he wants to go back to heaven. And the dad's like, hearing that from your 3-year-old isn't very good things to hear. So a couple of days later, his dad and his mom keep asking him, Colton, questions about his visit to heaven. So Colton starts talking about how Jesus has a cousin named John, and how he was sitting next to him and next to Jesus' throne, and how Jesus has horses, and how in heaven there was a rainbow, and that was the most beautiful rainbow he has ever seen in his life. A couple of weeks later, the dad and the mom start going through bills, and they realize that they have a lot of money that they owe to the hospital because of all the visits that they had to do. So without them even asking for help, a lot of people just started sending money to them because they knew they were going to need money and they knew they were going to need help. So they finally, with all the help that people gave them, they reached their amount that they had to give the hospital back. So the family thanks the people who gave them money for the hospital bills, and they pay the hospital, so that's taken care of. And then Colton just keeps talking more and more about his visit to heaven. Colton's mom gets pregnant again, has another baby boy. Colton starts talking to his dad about this war that's going to go on in heaven with the good people and the bad people, and heaven is going to be fighting Satan. And he starts talking about the devil and how he was an angel and how he saw him in heaven. It goes more into explanation about his visit to heaven and how God was fighting in a war, and how every good human was helping fight for the good side, and how the good side ended up winning. That's basically the end of the book. So to conclude this book review, I am going to say that in a couple of days I will be going to see the movie for this book, and I will have a movie review up for that sooner or later in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Other than that, I give this book 5 out of 5 stars. One of my favorite reads of 2014. So I'm currently reading The Throne of Glass, and I'm planning on making that my next book review, but don't quote me on that because I am not sure, because I am also going to start reading The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken and Panic by Lauren Oliver. And stay tuned for the movie review of Heaven is For Real, which will be coming pretty soon. Tell me in the comments below if you've read the book and if you liked it as much as I did, and tell me your favorite parts and tell me parts you didn't really like. This is it for this book review. I hope you really enjoyed it. I am very happy because I finally did my first book review and I really enjoyed it, and I am planning on making plenty more. So thank you, stay tuned for more, and like.